next guest is a truly fascinating gentleman. He happens to be 93 years old, and he is the father of public relations. In the course of his 70-year career, some of his clients have been Presidents Wilson, Hoover, Coolidge, and Eisenhower, Thomas Edison, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Enrico Caruso. It's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Edward Bernays.
Today, we cover a man whose name you might not know, but whose work has shaped the very fabric of our modern world. Meet Edward Louis Bernays, a mastermind of manipulation, the architect of modern public relations, and the unseen hand behind some of the most significant social engineering feats in history. Imagine a world where public opinion is carefully crafted, where our choices, beliefs, and even desires are subtly influenced by unseen forces. This is the world Edward Bernays envisioned and helped create.
Edward L. Bernays, you're the father of public relations. What led you more than 60 years ago to see the need for public relations?
I was a member of the United States Committee on Public Information in World War I, and I worked with the committee to make this the war to end all wars, which was Wilson's idea, and the war to make the world safe for democracy, and to popularize throughout the world the 14 points. And I found that ideas were weapons and were even more effective than bullets, because when Woodrow Wilson said freedom of the seas, the Swiss, who had been neutral in the war, recognized that they depended on freedom of the seas and came over to our side. And when one of the 14 points said independence for ethnic entities, various ethnic groups on the Baltic Sea who were owned a part of Russia decided that they wanted to be independent. The Lithuanians, the Lats, and the Estonians. And when I got back from the war, I recognized that ideas could be as important weapons as anything.
He wasn't a politician, a general, or a celebrity, yet his impact on society rivals that of the most prominent historical figures. Through his pioneering work in public relations and propaganda, Bernays redefined the way we communicate, persuade, and ultimately, how we think. Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he used his uncle's revolutionary ideas about the human psyche to develop techniques that could sway the masses. He saw the public as irrational and subject to herd instinct, believing that they could be controlled and guided by those who understood the mechanisms of the mind. His work has influenced everything from politics and business to social movements and cultural norms. His career is marked by some of the most audacious and controversial campaigns in history. From making it socially acceptable for women to smoke in public with his Torches of Freedom campaign,
cigarettes under their clothes. Then they should join the parade, and at a given signal from him, they were to light up the cigarettes dramatically. Bernays then informed the press that he had heard that a group of suffragettes were preparing to protest by lighting up what they called Torches of Freedom.
to manipulating public sentiment to facilitate the overthrow of a foreign government, Bernays' strategies were as bold as they were effective. So, how did Bernays, this seemingly obscure figure, become a silent puppeteer, orchestrating the thoughts and actions of millions? How did he craft a legacy that continues to shape our world in ways we are only beginning to understand? Join us as we uncover the story of Edward Bernays, the father of public relations, and explore the profound impact of his ideas on our society. Edward Bernays was an American pioneer in the field of public relations and propaganda, and was referred to in his obituary as the father of public relations. His most notable campaigns include a 1929 effort to promote female smoking by branding cigarettes as feminist torches of freedom, and his work for the United Fruit Company in the 1950s, which was connected with the CIA-orchestrated overthrow of the democratically elected Guatemalan government in 1954. He worked for dozens of major American corporations, including Procter & Gamble and General Electric, and for government agencies, politicians, and nonprofit organizations. His uncle was the renowned psychoanalyst, Sigmund Freud. Bernays' approach to public relations was deeply influenced by his uncle's work in psychoanalysis. In his books Crystallizing Public Opinion, 1923, and Propaganda, 1928, Bernays laid out his theories, drawing on the ideas of writers such as Gustave Le Bon, Wilfred Trotter, Walter Lippmann, and Sigmund Freud. He described the masses as irrational and subject to herd instinct, and he outlined how skilled practitioners could use crowd psychology and psychoanalysis to manipulate them in desired ways. Bernays later expanded these ideas in his post-war book Public Relations, 1945, which outlines the science of managing information released to the public by an organization in a manner most advantageous to that organization. Bernays was named one of the 100 most influential Americans of the 20th century by Life magazine. He was the subject of a full-length biography by Larry Tye entitled The Father of Spin, 1999, and an award-winning 2002 documentary for the BBC by Adam Curtis entitled The Century of the Self. Bernays pioneered the public relations industry's use of mass psychology and other social sciences to design its public persuasion campaigns. He once said, "If we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, is it not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing about it?" The recent practice of propaganda has proved that it is possible, at least up to a certain point, and within certain limits. He later called this scientific technique of opinion molding the engineering of consent. Bernays expanded on Walter Lippmann's concept of stereotype, arguing that predictable elements could be manipulated for mass effects. Instead of fostering independent thinking, universal literacy had given the common man a rubber stamp inked with advertising slogans, editorials, published scientific data, trivialities of tabloids, and profundities of history, but quite innocent of original thought. Each man's rubber stamp was the twin of millions of others, so that when these millions were exposed to the same stimuli, all received identical imprints. This process, Bernays argued, was effective because it worked with people's preconceived notions and drew them into passionate adherence to a given mental picture. In Bernays' view, psychology and sociology played critical roles in public relations. He saw the individual as a cell organized into the social unit, where touching a nerve at a sensitive spot would yield an automatic response from specific members of the organism. Bernays argued that the covert use of third parties was morally legitimate because those parties were morally autonomous actors. He believed that by influencing leaders, whether with or without their conscious cooperation, one could automatically influence the group they sway. One of Bernays' most famous campaigns was promoting bacon as a staple of the American breakfast. Through a survey of physicians, he secured endorsements that a heavier breakfast was healthier, and he arranged for these findings to be published nationwide with headlines like 4,500 physicians urge bigger breakfast. This campaign successfully increased the sale of bacon. Businesses found these covert methods irresistible. In their 1938 book, Business Finds Its Voice, Strother Walker and Paul Sklar wrote that Bernays had offered a solution to popular skepticism of business, which arose during the Depression. To implant an idea in a group leader's mind and let him spread it, than to write up an idea and send it to the papers as a release in the old-fashioned way. Bernays advocated that the masses are driven by factors outside their conscious understanding, and their minds can and should be manipulated by the capable few. He asserted that propaganda was the modern instrument by which intelligent men could fight for productive ends and help to bring order out of chaos. Bernays saw propaganda as the only alternative to chaos. He reconciled manipulation with liberalism by claiming that the human masses would inevitably succumb to manipulation, and therefore, good propagandists could compete with the evil without incurring any marginal moral cost. He believed that the minority wielding this power was increasingly intelligent and working more and more on behalf of socially constructive ideas. Unlike some early public relations practitioners, Bernays advocated for centralization and planning. Marvin Olasky described his 1945 book, Take Your Place at the Peace Table, as a clear appeal for a form of mild corporate socialism. He also argued that while propaganda is inevitable, democratic systems allow for a pluralism of propaganda, in contrast to the single official narrative of fascist regimes. Edward Bernays was a complex figure whose contributions to public relations and propaganda continue to influence our world today. His innovative strategies, controversial methods, and profound understanding of mass psychology shaped the way organizations communicate and manipulate public perception.